With the release of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, the Pokemon series now has over 1,000 different species, and with new Pokemon comes new cards for the trading card game. Some Pokemon do see more appreciation than others, having multiple cards printed, while other Pokemon have only just seen a new card, with their last one being released over a decade ago. In fact, there are some Pokemon that to this day haven't seen a new card printed in years. For example, every Ultra Beast. The last time any of these Pokemon had a new card was with Cosmic Eclipse, the last set of the Sun and Moon era. Some other examples being the Trico evolution line, the Generation 6 fossils Tyrantrum and Aurorus, Munchlax, Chespin and Quilladin, Azurill, and many more. Some Pokemon like the Chikorita line will most likely see a new card printed soon, seeing as it's one of the starter choices for Legends ZA, and the TCG is moving into Mega Evolution. However, there are actually a few Pokemon that have never seen a card printed for them. Some of these Pokemon have been featured in other cards, but other than that, they've never seen a standalone card printed in the TCG. So in this video, we will take a look at these underappreciated and forgotten Pokemon, starting off with form variations. In the video games, a couple of Pokemon can come in different forms. Some of these are based on the Pokemon's gender, related to the story or some type of minigame or item, etc. Hippopotas and Hippowdon are perfect examples. The male and female versions of this Pokemon look very different. Hippopotas, male and female, have their colours swapped around, while female Hippowdon is grey compared to males, which are brown. However, taking a look at the trading cards, there has never been a card printed for the female variant. It has always been the male variant of the Pokemon. The same can be said for Frillish and Jellicent, having very different aesthetics between the male and female, with the male variant looking like the guy from the Pringles cans. Taking a look at the cards, yes, the female version is present in some of them, but the male variant is always taking centre stage, with the female being behind him or off in the distance. Same with Basculegion. Despite only having a few cards printed, all of them only feature the male variant and none for the female variant. There are some Pokemon that have a lot of forms. For example, Vivillon from X and Y having 20 different patterns, with each one being exclusive to different regions around the world. The most common pattern we have seen for the TCG being the Meadow pattern. However, there was a time when, depending on what language of the set you bought, you could actually get a different pattern for Vivillon. In X and Y base set, this Pokemon had 7 different artworks, each featuring a different pattern depending on the language of the card. There was of course the standard Meadow pattern, but in English you could also get the High Plains pattern, Japanese was the Elegant pattern, German the Continental pattern, Italian the Marine pattern, Portuguese the Savannah pattern, and Russian the Icy Snow pattern. This was pretty cool and one of the few times Pokemon did something like this. However, there are still 13 other patterns that have yet to be printed on a card, and given that this multi-pattern thing was only for one set, I don't think they will ever be printed, given that every card for Vivillon afterwards uses the Meadow pattern only. 2 more Pokemon with multiple different forms are Furfuro and Alcremie. Alcremie has 63 different forms, each one requiring it to hold a different item and spin your character in a certain way. The only form that has seen any appearance in the TCG being the Strawberry Sweet Vanilla Cream form. All of the other 62 different forms haven't had a card printed. And if we want to be really picky, then the same can be said for its Shiny as well, as that also has an additional 62 forms, for a grand total of 124 different forms for Alcremie. Yeah, I think we can let the Pokemon Company off on this one. Furfuro, on the other hand, only has 10 forms, and we have seen a couple of them printed in the TCG, those being Kabuki, Matron, Heart, and Star. The others, however, haven't gotten the same treatment, and it seems we are purely sticking with the base natural form from now on with all of its cards. However, with Legends ZA and Kalos being the focus going forward, maybe we will see some new forms for this Pokemon, and those could be printed in the TCG. Floette and Florges also haven't had their other forms printed, purely sticking with the base red flower forms, but again, these two could see some more love in the upcoming Mega Evolution sets for the TCG. However, one Pokemon that strangely doesn't have one of its forms printed is Enamorus from Legends Arceus. This Pokemon was introduced as the 4th member of the Forces of Nature, alongside Thundurus, Tornadus, and Landorus. Each one of these Pokemon have 2 forms, their normal incarnate form, also known as the Genie form, as well as their Therian form, introduced in Black and White 2. While these 3 Pokemon have mostly seen their incarnate forms featured on their cards, during the Boundaries Cross to Plasma Blast era, they did each get a card featuring the Therian form instead. Enamorus, however, has only seen its incarnate form featured on cards. Its Therian form has yet to be printed. The same can be said with Calyrex. Now I know some of you may be thinking, hold on, we have Ice Rider, Shadow Rider, and Non-Rider Calyrex, so what do you mean? And yes, while Calyrex has had all of its forms printed as cards, you know who hasn't had a card printed? The horses themselves, Gastria and Spectria. They have only been featured as the rider version of Calyrex, never by themselves. Meanwhile, Calyrex does have a card of just itself. That's not fair, give the horses their time in the spotlight as well. There are a couple of other Pokemon that haven't seen forms or colour variations printed. Silvali's different types, Minior's different colours, though we do have an illustration rare featuring almost all of them, Unarmored Zacian and Zamazenta, and Appleton G-Max, but we have Flapple G-Max, which is literally the same Pokemon, like they both look exactly the same, so there isn't really a point to print both. However, now we move on to Pokemon that have never had a card printed. Yes, you heard me correctly. There are some Pokemon that have never, ever seen a standalone card printed for them. Some of them have been featured in other cards, but besides that, never by themselves, and conveniently, they're all Mega Evolution Pokemon. Mega Medicham, Pinsir, Banette, Sableye, and Lopunny. Mega Latias and Abomasnow were part of this list as well. However, we have seen a confirmed Mega Latias card coming in our Mega Evolution set, and a possible leak of a Mega Abomasnow. Mega Sableye and Lopunny have seen an appearance on tag team cards, but never as their own standalone card. However, these Pokemon may have their time in the spotlight given that the TCG will be moving on to Mega Evolutions going forward, but who knows, Pokemon may forget about them again and instead choose to focus on new Mega Evolutions if we see any coming in Legends CA. It's just a bit strange that these Pokemon were omitted. I can understand Latias because Mega Latias and Latios look almost identical, but I guess the others just weren't popular enough to warrant the attention. But again, these Pokemon could be getting their time in the spotlight soon, as we have seen Latias and a leaked Abomasnow, so there is always the possibility moving into the Mega Evolution sets. And that is every Pokemon, every form, every colour variation that has yet to see a card printed in the trading card game. With the forms, I can understand why they would only want to stick with one of its variations, as that's the one people are most familiar with, and at times they have printed different forms, like with Vivillon, which I think was a cool idea, but I guess it was only a one-time thing. But straight up not printing some Pokemon is a bit weird, but again, Mega Pokemon are coming back to the TCG, so these Pokemon will most likely be getting their time to shine, as well as having their first ever cards printed. Weird hearing that, considering these Pokemon were introduced into the game over a decade ago. I imagine other forms will eventually get a card printed for them, but it's not a necessity, just a weird oversight. And for the Pokemon with different male and female variants, who knows, they could just stick with the male variants as they have been. But for now, these are some of the Pokemon that the TCG seem to have forgotten about.